All right, welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're
Looking forward to this one.
we're going exploring a world that kind of mixes spirituality and controversy and even politics.
Yeah.
Though that's the Science of Identity Foundation. A lot of people just call it CEF,
Great.
and its leader, Chris Butler.
Yeah. Jagat Guru Siddheswarapananda Paramahamsa.
There you go. You're much better at that than I am.
Well, that's his, chosen spiritual name.
Yeah. So this is going to be a deep dive, and you've given me a really fascinating collection of material here. Online forum discussions
Yes.
that span from 2005 all the way to 2021.
That's quite a while.
Yeah, that's a long time. I mean, to think about what the internet was like in 2005,
Exactly.
it's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
So these posts come from a real mix of perspectives. We've got former members of CIF,
Right.
concerned observers, even current members.
That's right.
So our mission today is to really understand the history and the beliefs and the practices, but also all the controversies that surround CIF and its leader.
So CEF, they present themselves as this non-sectarian spiritual path.
Okay.
They say that they're based on, the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita, which is a sacred Hindu text.
Right.
But when you look a little closer, the story gets more complicated.
And these forum discussions highlight those complications, right?
Oh, yeah.
We see personal stories of people who are disillusioned with CEF. There are accusations of some really questionable financial practices.
Oh, yeah.
And even concerns about their political influence.
Absolutely.
Especially when you consider someone like Tulsi Gabbard. She's a prominent U.S. politician, but she was actually raised in this group.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to sort of unpack all that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's definitely a complex web, so to really understand it, I think we need to start with Chris Butler himself.
Okay.
Who is he, and how did he become the Jagat Guru?
So tell me, what is Jagat Guru? What does that even mean?
It essentially means world teacher.
So he's the world teacher of this organization?
Of this organization, yeah.
Okay, so how did he get to that point?
Well, picture the 1970s.
Oh.
1970s, a time of, intense spiritual searching for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we have this young Chris Butler who joins the Hare Krishna movement, formerly known as ISKCON.
Okay.
And he rises through the ranks pretty quickly.
So he was ambitious.
He was ambitious, yeah. And he clearly had charisma.
Yeah.
But then kind of a shocking turn of events.
Okay.
He's expelled.
Wow.
And this wasn't a quiet exit.
Yeah.
There were accusations of financial misconduct that were starting to swirl around him.
Expelled. Wow. I mean, that definitely would raise some red flags.
Right.
I think most people, after something like that, would kind of step back, reevaluate.
Yeah.
But not Chris Butler.
Nope.
He goes on and forms his own group in Hawaii, declares himself the Jagat Guru.
Yep.
Claims a direct lineage to Krishna himself.
And that's a key.
What made him decide to just go his own way like that so dramatically?
Well, I think sometimes when someone is ousted from a group like that, especially a spiritual one, it can fuel this this desire to prove themselves, to really double down on their beliefs.
Right.
They may feel like they were misunderstood or they were unjustly treated or whatever.
Yeah.
And it leads them to create their own space where their interpretation of the teachings kind of reigns supreme.
So they're in control.
Exactly. And that need for control can be a powerful motivator.
So he establishes CIF in Hawaii.
Yeah.
What did they believe in, and how did their practices maybe differ from the Hare Krishnas?
Well, on the surface, you see a lot of similarities.
Okay.
They emphasize bhakti yoga, which is a path of devotion in Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
They chant the Hare Krishna mantra.
Yeah.
They believe in reincarnation and this idea of the soul's eternal connection with Krishna, all very rooted in traditional, Hindu beliefs.
But I have a feeling there's a but coming.
There is a but coming.
Okay.
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
These forum posts start to highlight some pretty significant contradictions and inconsistencies with CIF's interpretations,
Like what?
Like their understanding of the scriptures
Right.
and the guru's role.
Okay.
It raises a lot of questions, especially when you look at some of Butler's pronouncements.
So give me some examples. What kind of pronouncements are we talking about?
So, Butler has made statements dismissing traditional marriage and family structures,
Okay.
downplaying the role of women.
Yep.
And then some forum users even describe instances of what they perceive as, intimidation and manipulation within the group.
That's troubling. That sounds like, what we often hear about with, cults is that they build the system where the leader's word is law. And, any questioning or dissent is met with pressure and maybe even punishment.
Exact.
And this is where Tulsi Gabbard comes into the picture.
Yeah, her father,
Right.
Mike Gabbard, holds a very prominent position within the CEF.
Right.
And, the organization's been involved in politics,
Yeah.
especially in Hawaii. They've supported anti-LGBTQ campaigns
Wow.
and some right-wing politicians.
So with those political leanings, I mean, it makes sense why people are questioning Tulsi Gabbard and whether she's a political pawn
Right.
for CEF
Right.
and for Butler,
Exactly.
especially with her family being so deeply involved. I mean, how much influence might they have on her political career?
And it's tricky because, she's publicly tried to distance herself from the group.
Right.
But then you see these forum posts and people point to evidence that suggests that, maybe those ties aren't totally cut.
Right.
And it just makes you wonder what's really going on behind the scenes.
So it sounds like CEF's influence goes way beyond spiritual teachings.
Yeah.
And this involvement in politics is raising some serious ethical questions.
Absolutely.
So we've got a guru with a controversial past, accusations of manipulation, and now we're seeing this political maneuvering.
Yeah.
So what's the overall sentiment about CEF from these forums?
Okay.
Are people generally supportive, or is there pushback? What are people saying?
Well, there are a lot of strong opinions out there.
Okay.
A lot of people are labeling CEF a cult.
Okay.
And they're pointing to something called the BITE model to support their claims.
The BITE model.
Yeah.
What is that?
BITE stands for Behavior, Information, Thought, and Emotional Control.
Okay.
It's this framework for understanding the tactics that cults often use to, manipulate and control their members.
I see. So how does that apply to CEF? Do the forum discussions give any specific examples?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like what?
Well, for example, former members describe being pressured to donate huge sums of money,
Okay.
and sometimes even to the point of financial ruin.
And then there are even, disturbing allegations of sexual misconduct.
Oh, wow.
Some involving Butler himself.
Are these claims substantiated?
Well, we have to remember these are allegations coming from forum posts.
Right.
We don't have court documents or official investigations or anything like that.
Right.
But the consistency and the detail of some of these accounts are definitely concerning.
So what about the current members? What are they saying about these accusations?
It's interesting. You see a range of responses.
Okay.
Some current members defend Butler fiercely.
Okay.
They dismiss the criticism as outright lies or misunderstandings.
Mm-hmm.
They say that CEF is a legitimate spiritual path and that Butler is a true guru.
Okay.
And it's like they're completely buying into this us versus them mentality that cults often create.
I can understand that, if you dedicated years of your life to a group and to this leader, it would be really hard to admit that maybe you were wrong.
Yeah.
That the person you trusted isn't who they claim to be. It's really difficult to see flaws in something that you've invested so much in.
Right. So they're probably in denial.
Yeah, and some current members do acknowledge that there have been problems within CEF,
Okay.
but they argue that the organization is evolving and improving.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to reconcile their beliefs with the evidence, even if it's uncomfortable.
So it's a mixed bag. You got the diehard loyalists.
Yep.
You've got those who are questioning.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the former members who are speaking out and putting themselves at risk to share these stories.
Exactly. And I think it highlights a really important point. Even within a group that might seem homogenous from the outside,
Yeah.
there's always this spectrum of perspectives and experiences.
Of course.
People join these groups for different reasons. They
Yeah.
process those experiences in different ways. So it's not a simple black and white situation.
No, not at all. And it reminds us that there's always more to the story than meets the eye.
Right.
People's motivations.
Right.
Their vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Their capacity for belief.
It all comes into play.
It all comes into play. And, people join these groups for a reason.
Right.
They're looking for meaning,
Mm.
connection, belonging.
Absolutely.
And a charismatic leader like Butler can exploit those vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Offering a seemingly safe haven in a world that often feels chaotic, uncertain.
Right.
So I think it's a reminder that we all have vulnerabilities.
Absolutely.
And we need to be aware of how those vulnerabilities can be exploited.
Yeah.
Especially by these charismatic figures who offer these easy answers, these promises of purpose.
Right.
So with these vulnerabilities in mind, let's Let's look a little deeper into the experiences of the former members.
Okay.
What are they saying about life after CEF?
Well, that's where things get even more heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You know, you read these stories, and it's clear that many former members really struggled to reintegrate back into society. After leaving CEF, they talk about dealing with these emotional and psychological scars,
Yeah.
rebuilding their lives from scratch,
Mm-hmm.
and facing this profound sense of isolation and loss.
Of course, I mean, this was their whole world for so long.
Right.
They probably gave up so much to be a part of it.
Absolutely. And they often talk about, the challenge of confronting their experiences and seeking support.
Yeah.
There's a real lack of resources specifically tailored to former cult members.
Right.
And that process of breaking free from that kind of influence can be incredibly isolating.
It really is a stark reminder of the lasting impact these groups can have on people, even after they've physically left.
Right.
It's not just about walking away.
No.
It's about rebuilding your sense of self and your understanding of the world.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a huge undertaking to leave a group like CEF.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It's a process.
So how does someone, get that involved in a group like CEF in the first place? What are the tactics that these cults use to attract and keep members?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's complicated. It's not like there's a single playbook that every cult uses.
Right.
But there are, some common threads.
Yeah.
One that we see pretty often is what they call love bombing.
Love bombing.
Yeah.
What's that?
So essentially, it's showering potential recruits with attention and affection.
Okay.
Making them feel incredibly special and welcomed.
Okay.
They might invite them to exclusive events, give them special tasks or responsibilities, or just constantly surround them with people who seem to genuinely care about them.
So if someone is feeling lost, isolated, or, lacking purpose,
Right.
they're being offered this community.
Yeah.
And a feeling of belonging.
Yeah, which is exactly what they've been craving.
Right. And cults are good at seeing those vulnerabilities.
Well, yeah, they target people who are, going through a hard time in their lives. Maybe they've experienced a loss or a breakup or a career setback.
So they're vulnerable.
They're vulnerable. They're looking for answers. They're looking for support.
Yeah.
They're looking for something to believe in.
And cults can provide that.
They do, but at a cost.
So it's more than just love bombing.
Oh, yeah.
What else do they do?
Well, once they've kind of got you hooked,
Yeah.
then they start to slowly isolate you from your existing support network.
Okay.
They might discourage you from spending time with family and friends who aren't part of the group.
Right.
Or they might, sow seeds of doubt about their intentions,
Right.
suggesting that they're not really supportive of your spiritual journey.
So the group becomes their entire world.
That's the goal.
Their only source of support and validation comes from the cult.
Exactly. They create this us versus them mentality.
Yeah.
Where the outside world is seen as, hostile or even evil.
Right.
And the group is portrayed as, the only true path to salvation or enlightenment.
So even if you have doubts, it's hard to leave.
Right. Yeah, it makes it much harder to leave
Right.
when you've got that kind of isolation.
And then you add in this charismatic leader.
Right.
Like a Chris Butler.
Yeah, who claims to have special knowledge.
Right.
Or a direct connection to a higher power.
And if you're already vulnerable and isolated, that authority can be so persuasive.
Precisely. And these leaders often employ a range of manipulative techniques to maintain their control,
Like what?
like sleep deprivation,
Okay.
controlling access to information,
Mhm.
using guilt or fear to kind of keep people in line.
So they break you down.
Yeah, it's really about breaking down a person's sense of self
Yeah.
and replacing it with the group's ideology.
It's like brainwashing.
Well, the term brainwashing is debated in these contexts,
What?
but these tactics can definitely have a profound impact on a person's thinking and behavior.
Right. They become so immersed in this.
Yeah.
It becomes their reality.
No.
So we've got these forum discussions.
Right.
Conversations spanning 15 years.
Right.
It's a unique look into, how people see CEF
Yeah.
and how that's evolved over time.
Right.
What are some of the recurring themes that emerge from these conversations?
Well, one thing that really stands out is the raw anger and frustration expressed by former members. They feel very betrayed by Butler and the organization.
Betrayed how?
Well, they dedicated years of their lives to CEF,
Yeah.
often sacrificing relationships, careers, financial stability.
And what are they left with?
They end up feeling disillusioned and hurt.
So what were some of the specific complaints?
There are frequent accusations of financial exploitation. Members describe being pressured to donate large sums of money.
Right.
Sometimes even told it's a test of their faith or devotion.
Right.
And as we talked about before, there are those disturbing allegations of sexual misconduct, including allegations against Butler himself.
It's hard to believe that people would put up with that.
Well, it's important to remember the psychological manipulation we talked about earlier.
Right.
You know, when you're isolated,
Yeah.
when you're constantly being told that the outside world is wrong
Mm-hmm.
and the group is the only source of truth,
Right.
it can be really hard to see what's happening clearly.
You rationalize
You
it.
rationalize it. You tell yourself it's for your own good.
You're not spiritually advanced enough.
Exactly.
So what about the people who stay, the current members? How do they respond to these accusations?
Again, there's a spectrum of responses.
Okay.
Some current members defend Butler, fiercely. They dismiss the criticism as lies, spread by disgruntled ex-members or attempts to discredit the group.
Right.
They maintain that CEF is a legitimate spiritual path and that Butler is a true guru.
Okay.
And they might even see the criticism as a test of their faith.
Right. Something to overcome.
Exactly. It's that us versus them mentality again.
Right.
Circling the wagons, reinforcing the group's beliefs.
It must be so hard to break free from that.
It is. It's much easier to hold on to your existing beliefs.
Right.
Even when faced with, contradictory evidence.
Yeah.
Than it is to admit you might have been wrong.
It's like cognitive dissonance.
Exactly.
So it's not just about blind faith or naivete.
No.
I mean, there are these psychological mechanisms at play that really make it hard for people to see the truth.
Right.
Even when it's right there in front of them.
And it's important to remember that, some current members do acknowledge that there have been problems within CEF,
Okay.
but they argue that the organization is evolving and improving.
So they're trying to find a way to make it work.
They're trying to find a way to reconcile their faith with the evidence.
Which can be a tough process.
It can be a really difficult and painful process.
So we've got the diehard loyalists,
Yeah.
those who are questioning, and then the former members who are speaking out
Right.
at great risk to themselves.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder of the complexities of belief
Yeah.
and the challenges of breaking free from a controlling environment.
It really is. And this diversity of perspectives within CEF, I think, is really important to remember when we consider the broader implications of the group's political involvement.
Right.
Especially through Tulsi Gabbard.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
We touched on CEF's political leanings,
Yeah.
their support for certain campaigns, politicians.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the bigger picture?
Right.
What are the societal implications of a group like this gaining political influence?
Well, it's a crucial question.
Yeah.
CEF's involvement in politics, especially their, support of anti-LGBTQ campaigns,
Right.
raises concerns about the potential for erosion of civil liberties,
Yeah.
increased discrimination against marginalized groups.
Right.
And it brings up these issues of transparency and accountability. Voters have a right to know about a candidate's background
Mm-hmm.
and the potential influence of groups like CEF.
Especially if those beliefs could actually impact policy decisions.
Exactly.
These forum discussions really provide a window into those connections and influences that we just don't get from official campaign materials or mainstream news.
Right, exactly. These discussions offer this raw, unfiltered look at the personal stories and perspectives that are often overlooked in traditional media.
Right.
They highlight these complexities of belief, the dangers of unchecked power, and the lasting impact of these groups on individuals and society as a whole.
So we've covered a lot.
We have.
We've got Chris Butler's journey, the inner workings of CEF, the accusations of cult activity,
Right.
even in the political ramifications.
Absolutely.
So with all this in mind,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways that you want our listeners to remember from this?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that cults can be incredibly deceptive.
Yeah.
They often present themselves as harmless spiritual groups or self-improvement organizations.
Right.
But beneath the surface, there can be a much darker reality.
So how do people protect themselves?
Right.
What are some red flags?
Well, be wary of groups that demand absolute obedience,
Okay.
isolate their members from loved ones,
Mm-hmm.
or have this charismatic leader who claims to have, exclusive knowledge
Right.
or a direct line to a higher power.
So classic cult signs.
Classic cult signs.
So it comes down to critical thinking,
Yeah,
maintaining a healthy skepticism.
exactly. And remember, seeking help is not a sign of weakness.
Right.
If you or someone you know is involved in a group that feels controlling or harmful,
Yeah.
there are resources available.
Reach out.
Reach out. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Trust your gut.
Trust your instincts. Yeah.
So it sounds like the more informed we are
Right.
about these tactics,
Mm.
the better we are at, protecting ourselves
Absolutely.
and those around us.
Yeah,
It's been a real eye-opener, this deep dive.
it has.
The complexities of cults, the psychology of belief, the importance of critical thinking.
It all ties in together.
We've learned a lot about CEF, Chris Butler,
Mm-hmm.
and the concerning aspects of, their political engagement.
Yeah.
But there's one piece of the puzzle that we haven't really explored yet,
Right.
and that's Tulsi Gabbard's story.
Yeah. How did her upbringing in this group shape her worldview
Right.
and her political career?
Exactly.
And what does her story tell us about the intersection of faith, politics, and personal identity?
Big questions.
Big questions.
So we're back, and we've been digging into this world of CEF.
Yeah.
We've talked about Chris Butler, his rise to leadership.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard from people who left the group,
Right?
and we've even touched on some pretty concerning stuff about their political activity.
Especially their support for certain campaigns and candidates. Right.
And, at the center of this political conversation
Yeah.
is Tulsi Gabbard,
Of course. The U.S. politician.
right, who was raised in CEF.
Yeah. I mean, her story is really interesting.
It is.
About faith,
Yeah.
politics, personal identity.
It all kind of comes together.
It really does. So how did growing up in this environment, with its specific ideologies and power dynamics,
Right.
how did that possibly shape her worldview, her political career?
Well, it's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
When you look at her political trajectory,
Mm-hmm.
you see this blend of progressive and conservative stances that can seem almost contradictory.
Yeah.
And it's led to a lot of speculation about how much of her ideology comes from her upbringing.
And how much is just her own evolution?
Right, exactly.
I mean, we can't assume that, someone's religious upbringing is going to directly dictate their political choices.
No, of course not. But at the same time, we can't ignore those early experiences.
Of course not. They shape our values, our perspectives.
Exactly. So it's a nuanced thing.
It is. Yeah.
Some people argue that, her early exposure to CEF's conservative social views,
Mm-hmm.
particularly their stance on LGBTQ issues,
Right.
may have influenced her political positions.
Yeah, she's faced a lot of criticism for her past opposition to same-sex marriage.
Right, and that really clashes with some of her more progressive views.
It does.
Her anti-war activism, her focus on economic inequality.
Right, and that's what makes her such a complex figure.
She defies easy categorization,
She does, yeah.
which has, intrigued and frustrated people
sides.
on all sides. And it's worth noting that Gabbard has actually publicly distanced herself
She has.
from some CEF's more controversial stances.
Mm-hmm.
She says her views have evolved over time.
Right, but even with those public statements, there's still a lot of speculation and debate about her connection to the group.
And these forum discussions, they get into all of that,
They do.
offering these insights that you just don't see in the mainstream media.
You see former CEF members sharing firsthand experiences,
Yeah.
observers analyzing her political moves, even some current members defending her.
Defending the group's influence.
Yeah, it's a reminder that truth is often multifaceted.
Yeah.
And there's rarely a simple answer.
When it comes to beliefs and motivations.
Right, exactly.
So we're wrapping up this deep dive.
Yeah.
What are some of the big lessons, that we can take from this whole story?
Okay, well, the story of CEF,
Right. Chris Butler,
Tulsi Gabbard,
all of it.
this complex, kind of interplay of faith and politics.
Yeah.
I think one key takeaway is the importance of critical thinking,
Yes.
especially when it comes to charismatic leaders
Right.
and groups promising easy answers.
That sense of belonging.
Yeah, it's easy to get swept up in the moment when someone's, presenting themselves as a guru
Right.
or a spiritual guide.
So we have to ask questions.
We do. We have to scrutinize claims.
Yeah.
be wary of groups that demand that unquestioning loyalty
Right.
or try to isolate members from the outside
It's
world.
all about balance, right?
It is.
Healthy skepticism,
Yeah.
but also curiosity.
Openness.
Openness to new ideas. How do we do that?
Right. Well, that's the challenge, isn't it?
It is.
I think it comes down to being discerning.
Okay.
You know, it's okay to be interested in different spiritual paths,
Yes.
philosophies,
Sure.
but you have to approach them with a critical eye.
With that critical eye.
Ask those tough questions.
Yeah.
Maintain your autonomy.
Don't just give up your thinking.
Yeah.
Someone else.
No matter how compelling their message might be.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
True spirituality is about personal growth, inner transformation.
Yeah.
It's not about blind obedience or unquestioning devotion to a leader.
And that applies to more than just spiritual groups.
Absolutely.
Any ideology
really movement.
that wants to control its members.
Exactly.
It's all the same.
Yeah.
So it brings us back to politics.
Okay.
What do we learn from CEF and the whole debate about Tulsi Gabbard?
Well, I think it highlights the need for transparency.
In our political system,
Yes, in our political system.
voters need to know
They do.
about a candidate's background,
Their beliefs.
any potential conflicts of interest. And we got to be talking about this stuff.
We do.
The role of religion in politics.
Right.
And the potential for influence,
From any group.
religious or otherwise.
Exactly.
And it really underscores the importance of media literacy.
Yes.
Especially in this day and age.
Oh, absolutely. This age of misinformation.
Social media echo chambers.
We have to be savvy consumers of information.
We do.
Do your research.
Yeah.
Read critically.
Seek out different perspectives.
Yes, don't just rely on social media or sound bites,
Right.
for your news.
Engage in those thoughtful conversations.
Yeah, with people who hold different viewpoints.
That's how we understand the complexities.
That's how we make informed choices.
It's about being active,
Yeah,
not passive
right.
in the world.
Shaping our world.
Yeah, wow. This deep dive into CEF,
It's been a journey.
it has been a journey.
I've uncovered a lot
Wow.
about spiritual seeking, controversial leadership.
The allure of belonging.
Yeah.
The complexities of faith.
And politics, and the story will likely continue to evolve
Right.
as Tulsi Gabbard navigates her career.
The questions about CEF will probably linger,
They will.
but hopefully these conversations will encourage people to think about their own beliefs.
Absolutely.
Be wary of those easy answers.
Yeah.
And really engage with the world around them.
Think critically.
Yeah. Use those critical thinking skills. It's a reminder that even in this world where there's so much information,
Right.
truth is hard to find.
It takes effort.
It takes vigilance.
And a commitment to critical thinking.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.
Keep diving deep.
And keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
Absolutely.